Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting our cyclical meeting devoted to the presentation of results. We're meeting online again, this time to discuss the results for the first half of 2020. The conference is a joint event for journalists and analysts. A heartfelt welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen, and you're all invited to asking questions through the form made available to you. In today's conference, Mr. Wojciech Dąbrowski, CEO of PGE Polska Grupa Energetyczna will take part, as well as Mr. Paweł Strączyński, the CFO. Over to Mr. Wojciech Dąbrowski. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation in the conference, wrapping up the publication of our results for the first half of 2020. It's our third meeting this year and a third one in the online mode, owing to safety measures. The Polish economy is facing zero-emission challenges. As we know perfectly, changes have to involve many sectors, such as fuel, chemical, transport, or farming. However, it's in the energy sector where the largest transformation will take part. We, as PGE, will be playing a key role, and we will be leaders of zero emissions. It's our aspiration to make sure that 100% of green energy for customers will be offered to our customers by our group by 2050. As you will know, because we've been informing about this since we've been appointed to the board, we've been working on a new strategy. We are approaching this in a responsible, positivistic way. Many people are involved, and we're far from being flashy. In working on our strategy, we've been using market data from financial institutions, Central Statistical Office, and all the segments of the group's business. We've introduced those data into our proprietary models. Owing to this work, a comprehensive strategy is being developed, allowing a successful transformation of the group towards green energy, which will become the benchmark for a group. As we've informed you, we've also tried to accumulate cash. Our debt has dropped by 2 billion, which is a large success. As I've mentioned, we're trying to accumulate money for new investments. We're also implementing changes to the capital group, facing the changes planned by the Ministry of State Assets. And owing to this, the board has established the holding council of PGE Group. The general agreement to be concluded by the boards of PGE Group's subsidiaries is already implementing mechanisms to address the changes in the regulations. In line with the first pillar of the projected energy policy, I'd like to allude here to the draft of the state energy policy 2040, which assumes the just transformation appropriation of the EU funding for the regions. We have started a plan of a just transition plan for Bełchatów complex. This involves the transformation for mining regions, such as Bełchatów and Turów. It does not need to mean problems for the local labor market. From the examinations concluded, it seems that green investments can even create more jobs. We're trying to approach it with full responsibility. I'd also like to address the money you've invested in our stocks. I draw attention to the fact that since our latest conference, i.e. in May, the quoting has grown by 90%. The stock prices grew by 90%. Thank you very much, because we approach it as an expression of trust in our declarations and actions. In the vacation period, the market mood was a little little bit lower, and now the price is a little bit lower. However, the market valuation is derivative of many factors that we don't always have control over, but it is our role to show the reliable picture of the company's situation and actions taken to build the company's value. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Over to Mr. Paweł Strączyński, CFO. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As each quarter, I will try to be brief and concise in presenting the most important facts and figures regarding the activities and business of PGE in the first half of 2020. As usual, we will start with the overview of the market situation. In the first half of 2020, we've had to deal with the difficult situation owing to the economic lockdown and the drop of electricity consumption by over 8%. We're talking about in absolute numbers, that's about 3.5 terawatt-hours, while increasing the net imports by almost 1 terawatt-hour. This has produced a very negative effect for us in terms of lowering generation, mostly in centrally disposed units by almost 12%. That's 4.4 terawatt-hours of lower generation. In July, it dropped by 0.4 terawatt-hours, and the generation dropped by almost 1 terawatt-hour. That's exactly 0.8. This situation in the energy sector was not favoring us, unfortunately, which we will be able to see by the segment results in terms of mining and conventional energy. Actually, all those units are centrally planned, so our impact on the efficiency of using them is only slight. However, we have to incur full fixed costs, which, when confronted with a lower generation and the sales of generated energy from those units, unfortunately translated into a loss in the profit, because the total unit cost per terawatt-hour has unfortunately increased. As regards the price situation in terms of band contracts, unfortunately we're still struggling with lowering prices. 266 zlotys in the second half versus 233 in the first half of 2020. In combination with the growing CO2 emission price, our simplified CDS, abstracting from fuel prices, is unfortunately dropping to roughly 100 plus zlotys. In comparison to 2019, the first half of 2019, the net generation dropped. I'm sorry, says the speaker. When it comes to the generation without the new units in Opole, because we have to take it into account as a factor which needs to be taken into account. In the first half of 2020, we had generation, which was lower. In terms of generation, it was a drop by 4.2. In terms of distribution, we had a lower effect by 0.8. First of all, owing to the economic lockdown. In terms of tariff A, the sales were similar. In tariff B, the volume dropped by half terawatt-hour. In C plus R, it was a large drop by over 1 terawatt-hour, and in G, it's negligible. All in all, the sales to end users dropped by about 8%, less than 2 terawatt-hours. When it comes to heat sales, they were comparable to the first half of 2019. It dropped by 0.8 petajoules to 27.8. In comparing the generation volume by fuel, in the first half of 2012, over 17 terawatt-hours were generated on lignite. This time 14.7, that's a drop by 2.3 terawatt-hour hours, and as I mentioned, the main factor was the lowering of the load and the decommissioning of unit number 1 in Bełchatów in 2019. In the case of hard coal, we had an increase by 1.1 terawatt-hour from 8.7 to 9.8. And in the case of the wind, we increased the generation by 0.1 terawatt-hour. Is the emissions in the emission rate of the group dropped, in the entire group dropped by 0.02 tons from 0.82 to 0.8. The most important financial results, recurring EBITDA after the elimination of a one-off event, that was the admission of free CO2 emission rights. Despite this, the recurring EBITDA dropped to about 182. Now, in the case of EBIT, without the elimination, we have a drop from 2.4 billion to 271 million zlotys, and we will tell you about this in just a moment. The net result dropped from 1.7 billion to it dropped by 2.4 billion to, unfortunately, negative results, 637 million in the red. We'll also tell you about the factors, whereas the net debt as compared to 2019 has been decreased by over 2 billion zlotys. If we compare it on a quarter-to-quarter basis, the drop of net debt is even larger because it represents over 4 billion, whereas in Q1, owing to the untypical situation that we had in the CO2 emission rights market, where the drop of the price to 14-15 euro triggered the necessity of providing cash as security, but efficiently we've been able to decrease the net debt in line with the declarations by 2 billion zlotys. The main factors of building EBITDA in the first half of 2020, these are obviously the elimination of the one-off event, that's roughly 1.1 billion zlotys, the effect on wholesale price of electricity increased by 915 zlotys owing to the realized price, but also at the same time The increase in the emission rights price caused for EBITDA to drop by 1 billion zlotys, so the higher price effect adjusted by the emissions rights is unfortunately negative. The fuel cost, that's about 9 million zlotys. Personnel costs have unfortunately increased by roughly 6%, 152 million zlotys. But let me add that this is all the effect transferred from 2019. It results from the previously incurred obligations by the group companies, and this year we had to deal with the execution of those obligations. The group margin on retail market, that's minus 93 million. Property rights and ancillary services, that's 100 million zlotys of impact, and other 104. The recurring EBITDA is at the level of 3,117 million zlotys after the elimination of one-offs. These are our reclamation provisions, and their valuation plays a significant role in shaping the result. After the elimination of that event at the level of 312 million zlotys, we have a reported EBITDA of 2.8 billion zlotys. CapEx has stayed at the level of 2019. We also have to remember about what has been transferred from 2019. We had many projects. The contracts for which were concluded in 2019 and they were launched in 2020. However, in two segments there have been significant changes. The first one is conventional generation, where CapEx has dropped on a year-on-year basis by 768 zlotys, but they increased by 617 million zlotys in renewables. So we're trying to, even in these difficult times, we're trying to implement the ideas by and by that we presented as we were being appointed, where we signaled we wanted to go green and increase the cash flows into renewables. The prospects of reported EBITDA in 2020 are unfortunately negative, especially in conventional generation. In the district heating segment, likewise, the impact is significant. We expect a further impact of extra CO2 emission rights granted, the increase in the CO2 cost. In terms of distribution, we also have negative expectations, unfortunately, mostly owing to COVID and the lowering of the distributed energy volumes. And we have neutral expectations in terms of renewables, and here I should even say that there might be, well, to be on the safe side, we might even say that there might be even positive, but however, we prefer to keep our expectations as neutral in this segment. In terms of supply, the prospects are unfortunately also negative, what impacts the lowering of the expected EBITDA in terms of supply is, of course, the lack of effect of price increases versus the growing cost of generation. In tariff G we cannot transfer it, and the growing number of prosumers and the issue of settling energy generated by prosumers, which is still not settled, and there's still no realistic idea about how to go about this. It's growing, and as the volume of prosumers grows, this problem will be growing rather than disappearing. I think these are the most important items that characterize the first half of 2020 in Polish Energy Group PG. Thank you very much for listening. And I think if you want to find out something more about this, we are ready for the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Q&A session where we will focus on the items that have not been touched upon during the presentation. Question number one, that's to Mr. Wojciech Dąbrowski. What's next? What comes next in terms of separating asset-based assets to NABE? The concept that we have presented is very well known to you. It has been commented in detail by analysts and commentators of the energy sector. That's the separation of coal-based assets to a separate, and we support this. This is the safest solution, both from the social and economic point of view. The concept presented by us has been submitted to the government. Right now, it's being discussed at the governmental level. It has been approved on a preliminary basis. We're waiting for the final resolutions and political decisions, but in our opinion, this concept is the most sensible one to ensure energy safety for Poland, to separate those assets to a separate company and allow us to obtain funds for growth, for green investments mentioned by Mr. Strączyński. As we said, we would invest in renewables. This is being pursued by us on a consistent basis. We hope the decisions will be made as soon as possible. As you will know, we are waiting for the reconstruction of the government, so I assume that after the stabilization of the reconstruction of the cabinet, work will start on finalizing that concept. Thank you very much. Question number two that we received this time, it's to Mr. Strączyński. Whether the impairment write-downs in conventional energy include the assumptions presented relating to the updated energy policy of the state by 2040. Ladies and gentlemen, in this rapidly changing environment and the rapid evolution of the energy policy which the European Union has been announcing, we've been testing those assets on a regular basis, which are characterized by higher emissions than 550 kilograms per megawatt hours. So first of all, our coal-based assets. On the 8th of September, the Ministry of the Climate published a summary of the updated document, the energy policy for Poland by 2040. As you will know, this document shows the directions in which the Polish energy policy should be heading in order to transform that energy sector. We've gotten acquainted with that document. However, we're testing the assets on a slightly broader basis than just the draft of the country's energy policy. For the first half of 2020, we performed the test based on price paths prepared by independent experts. The effect in the conventional energy, conventional generation was such that we made next impairment charges to tangibles of over 500 million zlotys. We are still waiting for the publication of the final document, which is right now being consulted and discussed with a broad circle of recipients. We're also part of that debate. And I think that after the adoption of the document in its final form, the impact of those assumptions to be presented in the country's energy policy 2040 will be reflected in the next tests to be performed. As I've mentioned, we perform those tests every 3 months, and all the new information will be included in those tests. As of today, we don't see any need to adjust the impairment tests. We believe that the paths adopted, and let me add that they are pretty much conservative, assuming a rapid reconstruction towards zero emissions, a low emissions generation. It seems to be the right direction. Our talks to our auditors have consolidated our assumptions and made us realize that these assumptions are by all means realistic, and I don't think there's any need as of today to change that approach. Thank you. Next question. It's to Mr. Wojciech Dąbrowski. How does cogeneration fit into the energy transformation? As you will know, both district heating and the energy sector are in a period of a deep transformation. Coal will not be our basic fuel in the future. We will be using gas fuel in district heating. In our subsidiary, PGE Energia Ciepła, we're involved in the project based on gas. That's in Siechnice, Bydgoszcz, Kielce and Zgierz. The new cogeneration plant, EC Czechnica and Siechnice, will be a key investment for the Wrocław metropolis, and in 2023 it will replace the coal-based cogeneration plant. The work is going as planned. And new locations are at the preparation stage. That's Gdynia, Gdańsk, Kraków, Rzeszów. That's a major project of transition from hard fuels to gas, and we will be pursuing it in the next years. Thank you. Next question, also to Mr. Dąbrowski. Orlen is announcing investments into hydrogen, and they believe this is the fuel of the future, also in the energy sector. So what does PGE say about this? A lot of companies and the media are talking about hydrogen. You can see that there's a lobbying and information campaign in terms of the solution. However, hydrogen is a very costly technology as of today. There are many years ahead of us to make that fuel universal and to take the cost down to an acceptable level. Right now, you don't see the end of this way, and the current status of the technological development means that a commercial investment into generation based on hydrogen would not be feasible. The cost would have to be incurred by the recipients, and that would be impossible. It's important for us to minimize the excessive charges to our customers and the cost of the entire energy system. Of course, we are open to new technologies, and we're trying to make sure that our installations would be ready to co-firing of hydrogen. Such an installation is even being built in Dolna Odra. The turbines will be installed in such a way that those turbines could be used for firing gas with a significant admixture of hydrogen. So in pursuing our investments, we are contemplating this and thinking about the future in terms of that this technology might be used going forward. However, as I said, as of today, you don't see the end of that path when that fuel could be used on a universal basis, because it first of all involves a lot of costs, and we're trying to control them. Thank you very much. The next question, also to Mr. Dąbrowski. What's the status of the sales of PGE paliwa, PGE fuels? Well, owing to the decision made by us half a year ago, as we took the wheel at PGE and made the decision of going green, and that we would be transforming PGE and the entire energy and power generation sector. We're the largest entity, and we mean to be pioneers and trendsetters in terms of the generation transformation. Hence the decision to lower some business activities. First of all, we cut off the business activities which were not profitable from our point of view. You will remember that we made some decisions and took activities to lower the expenditure, capex, by 1 billion zlotys, such ones which were not profitable, and the decision to sell PGE paliwa is part of this decision. We made the final decision in August, and the process of negotiations in those interested has been commenced. Right now we're involved in the negotiations with some bidders, both from Poland and from the broader market. Owing to the success of the negotiations, we're not revealing the details. We assume that the transaction should take place by the end of the calendar year. Of course, if it can be pursued, this decision of ours is also aligned to the expectations of the ministry, and it is meant to simplify the structure and the processes in our group. Thank you. The next question from our form, it's also to Mr. Dąbrowski. How would you respond to the increasing of the climate goal of EU's climate goal, 55% by 2030? Well, let me tell you that we're watching very closely what's going on in Brussels. We have our office there, and we're quite active in the EU institutions and following what's going on there. We take into account various scenarios. The Commission presented, actually this morning, presented its analysis on increasing the emission reduction goals of CO2, increasing it from 40 to 55%. It also proposes that it should be that also the share of renewables by 2030 should be increased from 32 to at least 38%. As per the Commission's assumptions, 55% by 2020 could mean the increase of the emissions to 60 euro per ton. Right now it's 27 euro per ton. So this decision makes us take radical actions not only at PGE, we already have taken such activities and we will be consistently pursuing them. But we realize that in the case of adopting that goal by the entire EU, which is assumed till the end of this year, the costs will have to be incurred by the generation sector. That's why we're preparing for those new challenges as part of our strategy. We are certain we will cope with this. We hope that we'll be able to obtain EU funding from the transformation dedicated funds, and the government is also involved in this. In the talks to the European Union, we as the sector will also be very active. We'll be fighting, struggling to obtain as much money into new investments into renewables. Thank you very much. The next question, this time to Mr. Trączyński. Does PGE envisage using green funding? Ladies and gentlemen, PGE, as of today, does not have problems with access to capital. We have current funding. Current funding is ensured to us. We have access to funds in an emergency situation, shall I call it colloquially. The key element, however, is the cost of funding. In the near future, we'll have to face another problem. It's not a problem of access to capital, which may, of course, prove to be a very significant problem in a situation when the funding institutions, having adopted the EU's restricted norms and goals in terms of the climate policy, new climate policy, will significantly accelerate their activities to support those goals, i.e. they will basically stop funding or restrict the funding of any entities that have fossil fuels in their portfolio, because you can hear voices that it's not only about coal, but going forward this will extend to all fossil fuels. However, abstracting from this aspect, the structural aspect, shall I say, and we paid attention to this aspect in submitting our proposal or taking part in the debate, when we put forward the proposal of separating our coal-based assets to a separate entity. However, it will be important to keep the net debt to EBITDA ratio. This year, this ratio is still satisfactory. It's at the level of 1.7, 1.6, 1.8, sometimes around 2, depending on the month, so it's still at a very safe level. However, ahead of us is the necessity of making really huge investments, both in terms of renewables, but also in terms of distribution. And we'll have to face those investment needs, given the negative prospects in terms of EBITDA as early as this year. And next year, Unfortunately, we have to keep in mind the unclear situation in terms of the power market and the significantly growing price of CO2 emissions, which directly reduces our margins. It might turn out that next year we will basically not be capable of increasing any debt. And this is the negative trend that we have to face, that we're already facing, owing to the optimization of the entire group's cost structure, because we have little impact on the macroeconomic situation. We're very vocal in the debate going on. We indicate the growing problems of the energy sector, generation sector. We communicate this in terms of the growing exports of energy, problems with prices, tariffs, the problem of the decreasing WACC to distribution tariffs. We're communicating this, we're raising these arguments. However, so far, this has not been confronted with specific actions, unfortunately, and we as PGE don't have any impact on many of those factors. The only thing we can do is appeal and stress those problems every time we can. Going forward, when the situation gets better, the situation will improve in two cases: either when the EU policy, climate policy, will change altogether, but it would be unrealistic to expect that, and the other scenario is the separation of the assets going the German way and ensuring safety both to conventional generation, because let me remind you that this concept, this idea of ours, is by no means an idea of closing down conventional generation. Quite on the contrary, this is an idea to ensure safety to the conventional generation sector. It ensures secure jobs and the safety for the energy sector. We're taking a broader look at the energy sector than just from through the prism of our own benefits. And as a leader, we must not forget Poland's energy safety and security and the safety of the energy sector. We must not forget the stability of the system. However, our decisions have to be supported by analyses and economic effects. Hence the idea. We believe that this will ensure both safety to the energy sector, both safety of and stability of jobs, and it will not, I hate to use the word, but I have to, unfortunately, it won't trigger a revolution, especially in those regions where conventional generation constitutes the most important source of income of the local communities, but at the same time it will be a very positive scenario for PGE, because it will enable our growth and development in those areas which are right now very much favored by the European Union. And in such a situation, when the situation changes and PGE, well, maybe I won't say that we will rapidly reduce debt, but the covenants will also change, and the providers of funding will take a different look at PGE, which will have no longer have any projects, or they will have few coal-based projects in their portfolio. In our portfolio, the covenants will also change. The level of debt that we will be able to achieve will no longer be like 3. I think we will be able to talk about also higher levels of debt to EBITDA. It's most important to ensure the base, the stable, repeatable EBITDA that will provide a basis for the further growth of the group. Thank you very much. Next question from people who are watching us. That's also to Mr. Strączyński. Has PGE in their test assumptions included the maintenance of prices above the prices in the international markets? Ladies and gentlemen, the largest energy group in Poland must not build its policy on uncertainties. It may not build any elements of its policy on the spot situation. I'm sorry about the expression, but I don't think there is a better one. The basis for multi-annual policies is ensuring safety. It's like we conclude contracts. It's not spot contracts. We conclude long-term contracts to sell energy or to buy or sell CO2 emission rights. We also hedge interest rates and foreign currencies just to eliminate the risk factors. We also hedge fuels much in the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, fuel prices, just as well as the CO2 emissions and remunerations, they are the largest cost categories. We may not fall victims to long-term, to short-term situations or spot situations. We have to ensure multi-annual safety of supplies, and you have to pay for that safety. It works pretty much like in the financial market. You have to spend some money right off and buy options, but then you can take advantage of this. And if the market trends reverse, we needn't exercise those options. If we want to have a cost-free solutions, we can conclude forward contracts. But then, of course, we have to conclude them. It works in the same way in the fuel market. All the contracts concluded are included in our valuations, so we don't just take any prices or spot prices which appear in the market. Our tests are based on realistic assumptions, on real contracts and the real prices that we're bound by. Thank you very much. Next question, also to Mr. Strączyński. How does the recession connected with COVID-19 pandemic impact the levels of receivables? Ladies and gentlemen, we're happy that despite the significant decreases in the sales and consumption of energy, as you have noticed, it was mostly about Tariff C, and it has only slightly affected Tariff G. I should say that we have a relatively good situation in terms of receivables levels. We're talking about overdue receivables. They are, of course, higher than in the analogical period of 2019. Nonetheless, the impact of those receivables, well, those receivables have no significant impact on the group's standing. If I remember well, we made an allowance worth roughly 20 million zlotys for receivables at risk, but we're monitoring receivables both in the group as well as in PGE Obrót. It is like a sinusoid. However, the trend is very satisfactory. At the beginning of the pandemic, in March, April, the receivables levels were 2.5 times higher. I think the support programs implemented by the government have helped us also a lot. We can see a correlation that as the transfers from the next versions of the governmental shield, also the levels of overdue receivables dropped. So we believe that our customers are also using those additional transfers to also meet their overdue payables for electricity. We're very happy about that behavior of our customers and happy about this trend, and I'd like to signal that as of today, this is no significant problem for the group. Thank you. Next question, also to Mr. Strączyński. PGE has informed about a shift by half a year in terms of the commissioning of the unit in Turów. What sort of penalties do you expect owing to that? Well, I'm sure that as regards the power market, I don't think we should be talking about 6 months delay. I think it's about 4 months delay, because we're starting to pursue our obligations at the beginning of 2021 in terms of power supply. If we cannot shift it, then we would be facing about 6 million zlotys worth of the penalties, with and the significant impact there would be the loss, first of all, of margin, because that unit, the new unit in Turów, per our assumptions, will be generating significantly higher margins than the old units. So we estimate the impact, the effect of that delay at roughly 40 million zlotys, including the penalty potentially threatening us for the failure to meet our obligations in terms of the power installed. Next question, also to Mr. Strączyński. When can you expect the new remuneration level for distribution for the next period, and will it envisage a more advantageous and more favorable cost of capital for the company? Ladies and gentlemen, this is rather a question to the regulator than to us. As I mentioned, unfortunately, we have absolutely no control, no impact on many factors. We are in constant contact with the ERO, and not only as PGE, but also through sectoral organizations that we're part of. I also mentioned this problem during the previous conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it's hard to envisage pursuing any investment if the return per the tariff is lower than the weighted average cost of capital in the group. The head of ERO has many factors at their disposal that might improve the profitability of the investment into distribution networks. We know the condition of our distribution networks. We also know that we're facing huge investments into distribution networks ahead of us. If Poland is contemplating the development of the prosumer market, this will not be feasible without the development of distribution networks. You cannot pursue that without a modernization of the distribution networks. However, we're not capable of pursuing significant investments if the weighted average cost of our capital is significantly higher than what is being put forward by the chairperson of VRO. We can also hear voices that that there are plans to reduce the tariff WACC to 4 percentage points. I think that would be an absolute stoppage. I'm not only talking about us, because the same situation relates to all the energy companies. That would stop any development investments, development-related investments in any companies. I don't believe the regulator's policy is moving in that direction. I refuse to believe this. And I believe that the regulator, the chairperson of ERO, in their analysis are taking that into account, and that a fair remuneration will be put forward for the investments which we're compelled to pursue. Without investments into energy networks, power networks, no realistic transformation is feasible. Thank you very much. The question to Mr. Wojciech Dąbrowski: when is PGE planning to announce its new strategy? As we communicated it before, we're very much advanced in the development of the strategy. It's almost there, we're almost finished. Its ultimate shape is determined by the governmental documents. First of all, the final shape of the state's energy strategy 2040, because our strategy will be until 2030 with a prospect till 2050. So it will be like a 10-year strategy, very detailed strategy with some outlook or prospects for the next 20 years. And per the schedule adopted, we want to present it to you toward the end of autumn. We expect that the governmental document will be presented in October, and then late during the season, the fall season, we will be able to present the strategy. That will be a transformation of the group in the green direction. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today's meeting is drawn to a close. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to answer all the questions, but of course we're at your disposal. Feel invited to contact the press office of PGE and the Investors Relations team. We're at your disposal. Thank you very much for your presence during our conference, and you're all invited to the next meeting during which we will present the results for Q3. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and goodbye.